disease, it's not just 1 or 2 cells. We sometimes do spot it just in 1 or 2 cells, and that's the early stages. But mostly when we find one of the foul broods, it's quite throughout a number of frames. But again, if we knew it was a high-risk area, we probably would look at it twice as many. If you know the beekeepers had problems, then we would probably look a lot harder. Well, not, if I can say a lot harder, but we would be shaking the frames and we would be doing a, looking for the one cell really. Here we're kind of doing a broad view of the frame and having a look to see what we can see, and it all looks really good. Okay, these are quite interesting to show you. On here you've got some which looks like filled out, wax capped over. Can you see?
Yes.
The cells have been just filled out. Now this is something which just came up. There's quite often a contaminated pollen in there, and the bees, it's probably got pesticide or some chemical on there, and the bees have detected that pollen's full of pesticide or something, and they cap it over. They seal it over with a wax capping. Alright, not always. This one actually has got honey in there, but it's a different capping. Quite often, if you do poke it, you do find pollens hidden under there. So this is just some kind of cells with honey in there. That's strange. Yeah, but quite often they'll cap pollen. If they find there's a problem with it, they'll cap it over. So I wonder,
just to stop people using it.
Yeah, from being used. So
I mean, if you found capped over pollen, would you take it out and analyse it to see what's in it?
Well, we don't, unless we've specifically been asked by the lab to do something like that.
So money bad days.
You couldn't do that. Gosh.
That's a fortune.
If you are willing to pay, yes, then yeah, we could analyse it. It could be tested. I mean, there have been some pilot projects which the inspectors have been doing last year, and I've had to send in brood comb. I've got some organic wax which has been put into one of my hives, and interestingly, it's a hive which I don't treat. it. I don't recommend doing it, but some beekeepers are now not treating their bees, and some have done it for years and years. I treat all of my existing colonies, I keep treating them, but if I collect a swarm, I don't treat anymore, and it takes a risk. I mean, there's the thought that if you don't treat, there are going to be lots of varroa being spread to your other hives. But you are treating all your hives at the same time, so that risk.
If you don't treat, you're trying to build up what we've got left.
To find bees which are resistant. Yeah. I mean, in our area, in Welwyn Garden City, we've got quite a lot of feral colonies living in chimneys, which have been there for many, many years. If they're being repopulated, I don't know, but there is a wild bee there.
You've got feral colony of bees.
So yeah, so what the association took over a couple of WBCs which hadn't been looked after for 12 years. Somebody just left them on allotment, and
you don't get a lot of feral.
No, you don't. But they've been there, and they were riddled with varroa. They had deformed wing virus. They were bulb brood, which is another sign of varroa. Were you on the varroa course? Yes, you were. You did the varroa this morning. So signs of bulb brood. And it had it all, and I thought, well, next spring they're not going to be there. But we didn't treat, and they recovered. They completely cleared themselves up. They got it again, and I thought, well, that's it, they've gone. But they recovered, and they're doing okay. And they've not been treated for 3 years, and they're very strong colonies, actually. 14 by 12s and doing very well. So there might be something in it, but obviously it's experimental.
Just spreading varroa.
Yeah, I would certainly know if I didn't treat some of my colonies, I would lose them. That's for sure. So
do they? So they just don't appear to have.
They have varroa.
They
have varroa, but they seem to be coping with it.
Right.
The question is, do they produce honey or not? And certainly where certain beekeepers have been just doing natural treatments with icing sugar, nothing else, they have bees, they get swarms, but they never get any honey.
Yeah.
And the bees don't really build up enough, and perhaps because he's losing the swarms, they just don't really make production colonies. But this is what we have to work on, and I'm doing kind of experimental now. I'm at the stage where I've got my bees I run around 50 colonies, and that's enough for me. And anything else, then when I get swarms which are from unknown sources, I won't treat them. And the idea is to find, is there any resistance?
I find, can I just ask a question about collecting the swarms? I mean, you know, I have to, obviously we all do, I suppose, have to collect swarms now and then.
Yeah.
I don't have an apiary where I can put swarms.
Right.
So I have to sort of take the risk of putting them in my sort of apiary.
Yes.
I mean, is it much of a risk?
There is a risk. It's a low risk, perhaps, because a swarm, it's like a shook swarm. We do shook swarms for European foul brood, and if you treat it like a shook swarm, it shouldn't carry any other disease.
Yeah.
European foul brood, but occasionally they could have American foul brood.
Yes.
I've had American foul brood in my business. This is many years ago, and
I don't think we have very high incidence around our way of American, do we?
No.
in those days when I started, I had 10 colonies, and I decided, because it was such a good swarm, I was just starting my queen breeding. I was learning about queen breeding, raising my own queens and my own bees, and I used the swarm because it was a nice swarm.
Other way
Wrong
round.
way. Yeah, that way round. I used the swarm to propagate, and I used probably about 9 of my colonies, split them and did all sorts of things, and I ended up losing 9 out of 10 colonies. And the only colony which I didn't lose was the one which was a bit weaker and I didn't touch. I did look at them, but I didn't do any splits or anything with them.
Right.
And that taught me a lesson. So
Yeah.